The emergency beacon cut through hyperspace like a scream in the void. Ambassador Kethara of the Voltharian Republic felt her secondary heart skip as the distress signal reached their diplomatic vessel. The frequency was unmistakable, a Galactic Council emergency broadcast, the kind reserved for extinction-level threats. Captain Zoldan, plot a course immediately, she commanded, her usually melodic voice tight with urgency. The bridge of the diplomatic cruiser Harmony's Edge erupted into controlled chaos as her crew rushed to respond. Kethara's people, the Veltharians, were known throughout the galaxy as master diplomats and peacekeepers. Their slender, graceful forms and empathic abilities made them natural mediators in conflicts between the various species that made up the Galactic Council. Standing 7 feet tall with skin that shifted color with her emotions, currently a worried shade of deep purple, Kethara had spent the last century helping to maintain peace across dozens of star systems. Ambassador, her communications officer, a crystalline Zarathi named Clicktel, chimed urgently. The signal is coming from the Corvani home system. It's bad, ma'am. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying the translated message. Kethara's skin went pale blue as she read the desperate words scrolling across the display. To any who receive this transmission, the Corvani Union faces total annihilation. The Drakhtari swarm has breached our outer defenses. Our fleets are destroyed. Our colonies burn. We estimate 3 days before the swarm reaches our homeworld of Corvanus Prime. 47 billion souls will perish unless immediate military intervention arrives. We invoke Article 7 of the Mutual Defense Compact. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need allies. We need them now. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Article 7 hadn't been invoked in over 200 years. It was the Galactic Council's last resort, a call for every member species to drop everything and provide military aid to a fellow member facing extinction. How long to reach the Corvani system? Kethara asked. A maximum burn, 18 hours, Captain Zoldan replied. The grizzled Thackeray's multiple eyes were fixed on his navigation console. But, Ambassador, with respect, we're a diplomatic vessel. We carry no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. Get that not that, Gavili. She knew their limitations, but they couldn't simply ignore the call. Send word to the Council. Tell them we're responding to the Article 7 declaration. And, Captain, push the engines past safety limits if you have to. As the Harmony's Edge leaped into hyperspace, Kethara retreated to her quarters to study everything the ship's database contained about both the Corvani and their attackers, the Drakhtari. The Corvani were an ancient species, one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. They resembled large, intelligent bears, standing 8 feet tall, with thick fur and powerful builds that belied their gentle nature. They were master engineers and architects responsible for many of the great space stations and defensive installations that protected Council space. Their homeworld was considered one of the cultural jewels of the galaxy, home to magnificent crystal cities and vast libraries containing the wisdom of millennia. The Drakhtari, on the other hand, were the galaxy's nightmare. A hive-minded insectoid species from beyond the galactic rim, they had been pushing into Council space for the past 50 years. Each Drakhtari was roughly humanoid in shape, but covered in chitinous armor, with mandibles that could tear through steel and forearms ending in razor-sharp claws. But their true terror lay in their numbers and their hunger. They consumed everything in their path, stripping worlds of all organic matter to fuel their endless expansion. Previous encounters with the Drakhtari had been contained through overwhelming force, but this attack was different. Intelligence reports suggested this was their largest swarm yet. Billions of creatures supported by massive bioships that grew themselves from consumed matter. Kethara spent hours reviewing tactical assessments, each one painting a grimmer picture. The Corvani's military, while competent, was designed for defense and peacekeeping operations. They were engineers and builders, not warriors. Against the Drakhtari's overwhelming numbers and savage tactics, they didn't stand a chance. The ship's intercom crackled to life. Ambassador to the bridge. We're receiving multiple hyperspace signatures. Kethra hurried to the bridge, her skin brightening slightly with hope. Perhaps other council members had received the distress call and were responding. The view screen showed the swirling energies of hyperspace, but dotted throughout were the characteristic exit flares of ships dropping back into normal space. How many vessels? She asked. Clicktel's crystalline form chimed as he processed the sensor data. 17 ships so far, ma'am. I'm reading Zarathi crystal ships, a Belnari dreadnought, 2 Minari fast attack vessels, and, that's strange. What is it? There's a ship I don't recognize. The design is completely unfamiliar. And Ambassador. Clicktel paused, his harmonic voice taking on an uncertain tone. It's big, really big. The main view screen shifted to tactical display mode, showing the positions of all nearby vessels. Kethra could see the familiar configurations of Council ships, the elegant, flowing lines of Zarathi crystal ships, the heavily armored bulk of Belnari dreadnoughts, the sleek dart shapes of Minari attack vessels. But they're highlighted in red as an unknown contact with something else entirely. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the length of the largest dreadnought in the Council fleet. Its design was brutally functional, all angular edges and weapon emplacements. Where Council ships favored curves and organic flowing lines, this vessel looked like it had been built for one purpose only: war. Captain, hail the unknown vessel, Kethra ordered. Channel open, Ambassador. Unknown vessel. This is Ambassador Kethra of the Galactic Council diplomatic ship Harmony's Edge. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Static filled the channel for several seconds before a voice responded, and Kethra felt her secondary heart skip again. The voice was unlike anything in the Council database. It was deep, gravelly, and carried an undertone that made her scales prickle with instinctive wariness. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force vessel Retribution. We receive your distress call regarding the Drakhtari swarm. We're here to help. Kethra exchanged glances with her bridge crew. Terran? The name wasn't in any Council database she knew of. Captain Chun, I'm afraid I'm not familiar with your species or your government. Are you a member of the Galactic Council? There was a pause, then what sounded almost like a chuckle. Negative, Ambassador. We're new to the neighborhood, but we've had our own run-ins with the Drakhtari. When we intercepted your call for allies, we figured we might be able to lend a hand. I appreciate the offer, Captain, but this is an internal Council matter. The situation is extremely dangerous, and Ambassador, Captain Chin's voice cut through her diplomatic refusal, and there was something in the tone that made Kethra's empathic abilities flare with warning. With respect, I've seen what these bugs can do to unprepared populations. You need all the help you can get. Before Kethra could respond, her communications officer chimed urgently. Ambassador, we're receiving another transmission from the Corvani system. Put it through. The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a battered Corvani commander. His usually pristine fur was singed and matted with what looked like blood. Behind him, emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow. This is General Morduk of the Corvani Defense Force. The bear-like alien gasped. To any Council forces receiving this, the situation is worse than reported. The Drakhtari have deployed some kind of new bioweapon. They're not just killing our people, they're converting them, transforming them into things. We have perhaps 12 hours before they reach the inner system. If you're coming, please hurry. The transmission cut to static, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. 12 hours, Captain Zoldan said quietly. We're still 14 hours out, even at maximum burn. Kethra felt despair washing over her, her skin shifting to a deep gray. They were going to be too late. 47 billion innocent lives were going to die because the Council's response was too slow, too disorganized. Then, Captain Chin's voice crackled over the comm again. Ambassador, what's your ETA to the Corvani system? 14 hours at our current speed. Kethra replied automatically. Understood. Retribution will arrive in approximately 6 hours. We'll do what we can to buy you time. Captain, you don't understand, Kethare said, her diplomatic training finally overriding her shock. The Drakhtari aren't like other hostile species. They're a hive mind with billions of individual units. They strip everything organic from planets they conquer. Your single ship, no matter how large, cannot possibly, Ambassador. There was something in Captain Chen's voice that made every being on the bridge go quiet. You don't know what humans are capable of. Humans. Our species name. And don't worry about us, Ambassador. We didn't come alone. The tactical display updated, and Kethare felt her legs nearly give out. The single unknown ship they had detected was no longer alone. Dozens of new contacts were appearing on sensors as more vessels dropped out of hyperspace. They were all of the same brutal, angular design. Warships built by a species that clearly understood violence in a way that the peaceful races of the Council did not. "How many ships do you have?" she whispered. "For this operation? Just a light patrol squadron. 24 vessels." Captain Chen's tone was casual, as if discussing the weather. "We try not to overcommit resources to unknown situations." "A light patrol?" Kethare's voice cracked. The tonnage she was seeing on sensors represented more military might than some council member species possessed in their entire fleets. "Yes, ma'am. Look, Ambassador, I know this is probably a shock, but right now, there are 47 billion innocent people who are going to die if someone doesn't stop these Drakhtari. We can do that. The question is, are you going to let us?" Kethare looked around her bridge. Her crew, representatives of several different council species, all stared back at her with expressions ranging from fear to desperate hope. She thought about the Corvani children who would never see another sunrise if the swarm wasn't stopped. She thought about the ancient libraries and crystal cities that would be reduced to organic sludge. She thought about 47 billion lives hanging in the balance. "Captain Chun," she said finally, "what do you need from us? Just stay back and coordinate with any other council forces that show up. We'll handle the shooting part." As the human fleet disappeared back into hyperspace, heading for the Corvani system at impossible speeds, Kethare slumped in her command chair. Her skin was cycling through colors so rapidly that her crew was getting dizzy watching her. "Ambassador," Captain Zaldan said quietly, "what have we just unleashed?" Kethare stared at the tactical display where the human ships had been. Something deep in her empathic senses, something that had been refined over centuries of reading alien emotions, was screaming warnings she couldn't quite understand. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have the feeling we're about to find out what happens when someone calls for allies, and Deathworlders answer instead." The Harmony's Edge continued its desperate race toward the Corvani system, but now they were no longer rushing to attempt a rescue. They were rushing to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. In the depths of space, 24 human warships bore down on the Drakhtari swarm with the inexorable momentum of predators who had finally found worthy prey. For the first time in their expansion beyond the galactic rim, the Drakhtari were about to encounter something more dangerous than they were. They were about to meet humanity. The TDF Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Corvani system like a knife cutting through silk. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought, her dark eyes taking in the tactical display that showed the horror unfolding before them. The Corvani system was dying. 3 of the outer planets had already gone dark, their surfaces stripped bare by the Drakhtari swarm. The 4th planet was in the process of being consumed, its once blue oceans now a sickly brown as billions of insectoid creatures devoured everything they touched. And, bearing down on Corvanus Prime, the jewel of Corvani civilization, was a biofleet that defied comprehension. "Jesus Christ," whispered Commander Martinez, Chen's executive officer. "How many of those things are there?" The Drakhtari fleet filled the tactical display like a cancer. Bioships the size of small moons pulsed with organic light, their surfaces crawling with what looked like cities' worth of the insectoid creatures. Smaller vessels, though still larger than anything in most council fleets, swarmed around them like antibodies protecting a massive organism. Computer estimates 47,000 individual bioships, reported Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka from a sensor station. Total Drakhtari population in the system it's showing error messages. Over 100 billion individual organisms. Chen nodded grimly. She'd fought the Drakhtari before, during humanity's first contact with the hive mind 3 years ago when they tried to invade the Tau Ceti colonies. That had been a much smaller force, maybe 1 million creatures and a handful of bioships. It had still taken 6 months to root them out completely. This was different. This was a full invasion force, the kind that had probably taken the Drakhtari decades to assemble. And it was bearing down on a species that built things instead of destroying them. Captain, incoming transmission from the Corvani homeworld, called Communications Officer Park. Put it through. The main screen flickered to show a massive Corvani in military dress, his fur singed and his small black eyes wide with desperation. Behind him, Chan could see other Corvani rushing around what looked like a military command center, the air thick with smoke. Unknown vessels. This is General Morduk of the Corvani Defense Force. We detected your ships entering the system. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. General, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. We're here in response to your Article 7 declaration. The Corvani's eyes widened even further. Terran? I'm not familiar with your species. Are you members of the Galactic Council? No, sir. We're new to the galactic community, but we've dealt with the Drakhtari before. Chen's voice was steady, professional. We're here to help. Captain Chun, I appreciate any assistance, but I must warn you, this is the largest Drakhtari force ever assembled. Our entire fleet has been destroyed. They have weapons and tactics we've never seen before. This may be beyond anyone's ability to stop. Chen exchanged a glance with Martinez. They'd both read the intelligence reports about the various council species. The Corvani were builders, engineers, architects. They thought in terms of creation and defense. The concept of total warfare, of destroying your enemy so completely that they could never threaten you again, was foreign to them. General, how long before they reach your homeworld? At current speed, 8 hours. Maybe less if they deploy more of those things they've been using. Understood. General, I need you to evacuate as many civilians as possible to the far side of your planet. Get them into deep shelters or underground facilities. Things are about to get very loud. Captain, with respect, you have only 24 vessels. The swarm has thousands. General. Chen's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles that turned entire star systems into graveyards. Trust me. The transmission ended, and Chun turned to her tactical officer. Commander Torres, what's our targeting solution look like? Commander Elena Torres, a woman whose grandparents had fought in the resource wars on Earth, smiled with the expression of a predator sighting prey. Ma'am, it's a target-rich environment. We've got clear firing solutions on approximately 1,500 bioships from our current position. And the fleet? All ships report ready for combat operations. The Yamamoto and Bismarck are requesting permission to advance and engage the outer screen. Chen nodded. The heavy cruisers were her fast attack specialists, designed to punch through enemy lines and cause maximum chaos. Granted, tell them to give these bugs something to think about. On the tactical display, 2 points of light detached from the human formation and accelerated toward the Drakhtari swarm at velocities that should have been impossible for ships their size. The Drakhtari, as expected, responded immediately. A cloud of smaller bioships, each one the size of a council frigate, broke off from the main swarm and moved to intercept. Incoming transmission from the Yamamoto, Park reported. Put Captain Yamamoto through. The screen split to show Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto on the bridge of his heavy cruiser. Behind him, Chun could see his crew working with the calm efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Captain Chun, requesting permission to demonstrate standard anti-swarm protocol 7. Chun almost smiled. Protocol 7 was something the TDF had developed specifically after studying Drakhtari tactics. It was brutally effective and completely terrifying to watch. Permission granted, Captain. Show them what humans do to bugs. The transmission ended, and Chun watched as the two heavy cruisers suddenly split apart, their formations spreading wide as they approached the cloud of Drakhtari interceptors. The bug ships, operating on hive mind tactics that prioritized overwhelming force, condensed into a tight formation to maximize their firepower advantage. It was exactly what the humans had been counting on. All ships, this is retribution. Chun broadcast on the fleet channel. You are weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. Let's show these things why Earth is a Class 12 death world. What happened next would later be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for decades to come. The Yamamoto and Bismarck opened fire simultaneously, but not with the energy weapons or projectile systems that the Drakhtari had encountered from other Council species. Instead, they unleashed something that no galactic civilization had ever thought to weaponize: nuclear fire. Fusion missiles streaked across space, each one containing the compressed fury of a star. The Drakhtari bioships, evolved to absorb and deflect energy weapons, were completely unprepared for weapons that didn't just hit them, weapons that erased them from existence in balls of superheated plasma. The first wave of missiles struck the center of the Drakhtari formation, and a small star bloomed in space. Dozens of bioships simply vanished, their organic hulls unable to withstand temperatures that reached millions of degrees. The shockwave sent hundreds more tumbling out of formation, their biological control systems stunned by the electromagnetic pulse that followed each detonation. But that was just the beginning. As the surviving Drakhtari ships struggled to recover, the human cruisers were already launching their second wave of attacks. Kinetic penetrators, tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, punched through bioship hulls like bullets through paper. Each impact released kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon, turning the interior of each target into superheated plasma. "My God," whispered Commander Martinez, watching the tactical display as hundreds of Drakhtari ships disappeared from sensors. "They're not even slowing down." Chun nodded. This was what humans brought to galactic warfare. Not just advanced technology, but a mindset that had been forged in the crucible of a death world where everything was trying to kill you. Earth had been humanity's teacher in the art of survival, and survival meant being more dangerous than anything else on your planet. The Drakhtari, for their part, were learning that they had encountered something completely outside their experience. Their hive mind, which had conquered dozens of species by overwhelming them with superior numbers and relentless aggression, was struggling to process what was happening. The humans weren't trying to outfight the swarm. They were trying to exterminate it. "Captain," Torres called out, "the main swarm is responding. They're moving to support the interceptor group." "How many?" "All of them." Chun raised an eyebrow. The entire Drakhtari fleet, 47,000 bioships, was now accelerating toward the human positions. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Ma'am," Martinez said quietly, "that's a lot of bugs." "Yes, it is," Chun agreed. "Torres, signal the fleet. Formation Delta 7, full engagement protocols." Formation Delta 7 was something human military planners had developed after studying swarm tactics from Earth's own evolutionary history. When faced with overwhelming numbers, you didn't try to fight them all at once. You made them come to you, and then you killed them in the most efficient way possible. The human fleet suddenly spread out, each ship taking a position that maximized its firing arcs while providing overlapping fields of destruction. It looked like they were preparing to be overwhelmed, but appearances could be deceiving. "All ships, this is retribution," Chun broadcast. "Remember, these things think in terms of biomass and resource consumption. They don't understand the concept of overkill. Let's teach them." The Drakhtari swarm hit the human formation like a living tide of death, billions of creatures aboard thousands of bioships, all focused on overwhelming the small human fleet through sheer mass. They had never encountered weapons designed by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Fusion missiles turned space into a constellation of miniature suns. Particle beams, powered by reactors that generated more energy than some stars, carved through bioships like swords through silk. Rail guns launched projectiles at velocities that turned them into pure kinetic energy, each shot capable of punching through multiple targets. But it was the chemical weapons that truly terrified the Drakhtari. Humans had learned warfare from a planet where everything was poisonous, where creatures killed each other with toxins that could end life in seconds. They had taken that knowledge and refined it into weapons that could sterilize entire bioships, turning the Drakhtari's own biological nature against them. Clouds of engineered viruses, specifically designed to target Drakhtari genetic markers, spread through the swarm like invisible death. Bioships that had seemed healthy one moment began dying from the inside as their organic systems shut down. The Drakhtari hive mind, for the first time in its existence, began to experience something it had never known: fear. "Captain," Tanaka called out, her voice tight with concentration, "the swarm is beginning to break up. They're retreating." Chun watched the tactical display as thousands of Drakhtari ships suddenly changed course, fleeing from the human fleet toward the outer system. It was unprecedented. The Drakhtari never retreated. They fought until they won or until they were extinct. But they had never fought humans before. "Pursue and destroy," Chen ordered calmly. "No survivors." What followed was less a battle and more an extermination. Human ships, designed for sustained combat operations, chased the fleeing Drakhtari through the system, systematically destroying every bioship they could find. The humans fought with a cold efficiency that was more terrifying than any berserker rage. They killed not out of anger or hatred, but because they had identified the Drakhtari as a threat to innocent life, and threats had to be eliminated. General Morduk watched from the surface of Corvinus Prime as the stars in his sky suddenly blazed with new light. The night side of his planet was lit up like day as human weapons turned the Drakhtari fleet into expanding clouds of superheated gas. "General," one of his staff officers said quietly, "I'm reading massive energy discharges throughout the system. The Drakhtari fleet is gone." "Gone? Destroyed, sir. All of them." "I'm reading maybe a few dozen bioships fleeing toward the Galactic Rim, but the main swarm, it's been completely eliminated." Morduk stared at the display, showing the tactical situation. In less than 3 hours, the human fleet had done what the combined militaries of a dozen council species had failed to do in 50 years. They had not just defeated a Drakhtari swarm. They had annihilated it so completely that it would take the hive mind decades to recover. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." "Put it through." Captain Shin appeared on the screen, looking calm and professional despite having just orchestrated one of the most devastating military victories in galactic history. "General Morduk, this is Captain Shun. The immediate threat to your system has been eliminated. We're conducting final sweeps to make sure we didn't miss anything." "Captain, how did you—" That was the largest Drakhtari force ever assembled. They outnumbered you thousands to one." Chin's expression was matter of fact. "General, humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to be better at killing than anything else. The Drakhtari are dangerous, but they're not the most dangerous thing we've ever faced." What was the most dangerous thing you ever faced?" Chin's smile was cold enough to freeze helium. "Each other." The transmission ended, leaving Morduk staring at a blank screen while his staff worked to process what they had just witnessed. 47 billion lives had been saved, an extinction-level threat had been eliminated, and they had been introduced to a species that treated galactic-scale warfare like a routine police action. In the depths of space, the human fleet regrouped and began their systematic hunt for any surviving Drakhtari. They would not stop until every single bioship was destroyed, every creature eliminated. It wasn't cruelty. It was simply how humans dealt with existential threats. The galaxy was about to learn that when you called for allies, sometimes what answered was something far more dangerous than your enemies. Ambassador Ketharay's ship arrived in the Corvani system 12 hours after the last Dractari bioship had been reduced to drifting particles. The Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find a war zone. Instead, they found something that defied all understanding. Peace. Sensors show no active hostilities, reported Clicktel, his crystalline form chiming in confusion. The Dractari swarm appears to be gone. Gone. Ketharay stared at the tactical display, her skin shifting through several colors as her emotions warred with each other. Define gone. Destroyed, ma'am. I'm detecting massive debris fields throughout the system, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever weapons were used here, they were thorough. Captain Zoldan leaned over his navigation console, his multiple eyes widening as he processed the sensor data. Ambassador, I'm reading significant radioactive signatures around the debris fields. These readings are consistent with nuclear weaponry. Nuclear? Ketharay felt her scales prickle with alarm. Nuclear weapons have been banned by the Galactic Council for over 500 years, ever since the Talmoran incident had sterilized an entire moon. That's impossible. No Council species uses nuclear weapons in space combat. No Council species, ma'am, Clicktel agreed. But the humans aren't Council members. Before Ketharay could respond, her communications officer announced an incoming transmission. Ambassador, we're being hailed by the human flagship. Put it through. Captain Chen appeared on the view screen, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had apparently just committed multiple war crimes by Council standards. Behind her, Ketharay could see human crew members working calmly at their stations, as if obliterating a galactic-scale invasion force was routine business. Ambassador Ketharay, welcome to the Corvani system. I hope your journey was pleasant. Ketharay's diplomatic training warred with her shock. Captain Shun, we're reading massive destruction throughout the system. The Dractari fleet has been eliminated, Chen finished matter-of-factly. Total casualty count was 46,837 bioships destroyed, with an estimated Dractari population loss of 112 billion organisms. We're currently tracking 17 fleeing vessels that managed to escape toward the galactic rim. The casualty numbers hit Ketharay like a physical blow. She had witnessed the aftermath of major battles before, but nothing on this scale. 112 billion. The Dractari don't take prisoners, Ambassador, and they don't negotiate. When dealing with a hive mind bent on consuming all organic life in the galaxy, half measures are an option. Chen's tone was calm, almost clinical. We eliminated the threat. Captain, I need to inform you that the use of nuclear weapons in space is banned under Galactic Council accords. Ambassador, Chen interrupted gently. Humans aren't signatories to those accords. We use whatever tools are necessary to protect innocent life. Before Ketharay could respond, another voice cut into the conversation. This is General Morduk of the Corvani Defense Force. Ambassador Ketharay, I am formally requesting immediate emergency session with the Galactic Council regarding these humans. General, what's your status? Ketharay asked, grateful for the distraction from her growing ethical concerns. We're alive, Ambassador. All 47 billion of us. Because of them. The massive Corvani's voice carried a weight of emotion that Ketharay's empathic abilities picked up like a shout. Gratitude, awe, and something else, fear. But, Ambassador, we need to talk. All of us. About what we've just witnessed. 3 hours later, representatives from a dozen council species had gathered via hologram in the main conference room aboard the Harmony's Edge. The meeting was supposed to be a debriefing on the Dractari threat, but it had quickly become something else entirely. Humanity's first formal contact with galactic civilization. Captain Shun sat at one end of the conference table, looking remarkably composed despite being outnumbered 12-1 by some of the most powerful political figures in the galaxy. Ketharay had seen seasoned diplomats crack under this kind of pressure, but the humans seemed almost bored. Captain Shun, began Counselor Vextai of the Belnari hegemony, his massive form filling most of his holographic projection. "We appreciate your intervention in the Corvani crisis. However, we have serious concerns about your methods." Chen nodded politely. "I'm listening, Counselor." "The use of nuclear weapons, chemical warfare, and what our analysts are calling genocide tactics against the Drakhtari represents a level of military aggression that the Galactic Council finds disturbing." Disturbing? Chen's eyebrow raised slightly. "Counselor, with respect, the Drakhtari were in the process of committing genocide against 47 billion Corvani civilians. We stopped them. But your methods," began Counselor Yilandra of the Minari Republic, "were effective," General Morduck interrupted, his massive form leaning forward in his chair. "Counselors, with the greatest respect to this body and its principles, my people would be dead right now if not for human intervention. The Drakhtari had overwhelmed our defenses, and none of our traditional allies could have arrived in time. The issue isn't whether human intervention was necessary," said Counselor Telvan of the Thrakari Union. "The issue is the level of violence they employed. The complete annihilation of the Drakhtari force goes against every principle of proportional response that the Council has established." Chen was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a tone that made every being in the room feel suddenly uncomfortable. "Counselor, let me ask you a question. How many times have you fought the Drakhtari?" "What do you mean? How many times has your species engaged Drakhtari forces in direct combat?" "The Thrakari have participated in several joint council operations against Drakhtari incursions. Joint operations where the Drakhtari were outnumbered and you had overwhelming firepower advantage," Chen interrupted. "But how many times have you faced them when they outnumbered you? When they had the tactical advantage? When your survival depended entirely on killing every single one of them before they could kill you?" The council members exchanged glances. The truth was that most of their encounters with the Drakhtari had been exactly as Chun described, carefully planned operations with massive numerical and technological advantages. "Captain," Kethare said carefully, "we understand that humans are apparently experienced in warfare, but the level of destruction we're seeing here is what happens when you let a problem grow until it becomes an existential threat." Chin finished. "Ambassador, how long have the Drakhtari been probing council space?" "Approximately 50 years. And in those 50 years, what has the council's response been?" Kethare's skin shifted to an uncomfortable shade of brown. "Measure responses. Defensive actions. Attempts at communication. 50 years of half measures that allowed them to grow stronger and more confident," Chun said bluntly. 50 years of treating a hive mind bent on galactic consumption like a rational actor that can be negotiated with. Do you know what humans call that approach? What? Feeding the monster until it's strong enough to eat you. The silence that followed was broken by a new voice joining the conference. "If I may interject," said a cultured accent that made everyone turn toward the new holographic projection. The figure that appeared was clearly human, but different from Captain Chun. Where Chun was military, practical, and direct, this man was refined, elegant, and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to high society. He wore what appeared to be formal diplomatic dress, and had the kind of smile that suggested he found the entire situation amusing. "I apologize for the intrusion," he continued smoothly. "I am Ambassador Thomas Hartwell of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I've been monitoring this conversation from our embassy ship, and I felt it might be helpful if I provided some context." "Embassy ship?" Kethare asked. "The TFS Olive Branch. We've been observing this situation from a respectful distance, gathering data for our first formal contact with galactic civilization." Hartwell's smile widened. "Though I must say, Captain Chun has certainly made an impression." "Ambassador Hartwell," Counselor Vextai said formally, "while we appreciate human intervention in this crisis, we have serious concerns about your species' approach to conflict resolution." "Of course you do," Hartwell agreed cheerfully. "That's perfectly understandable. You see, humans have a rather unique perspective on warfare that comes from our evolutionary background." "Evolutionary background?" "Yes. You see, humans evolved on what we classify as a Class 12 death world. That designation means that our planet actively tries to kill everything living on it through weather, geological activity, predators, diseases, and natural disasters. For humans to survive and become the dominant species on Earth, we had to become more dangerous than everything else on our planet. The council members stirred uneasily. The concept of a death world was known to galactic civilization, but most inhabited planets were class 1 or 2 at most, worlds where life existed in relative harmony. A class 12 world was theoretically uninhabitable. Ambassador, Counselor Yelendris said carefully, "Are you saying that your entire species evolved under constant mortal threat?" "More than that," Hartwell replied. "We evolved under constant threat from multiple sources simultaneously. Predators that could kill us in seconds, whether that could freeze or cook us, diseases that could wipe out entire populations, natural disasters that could destroy continents, and perhaps most importantly, competition from our own species." Your own species? Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years competing with other human tribes for limited resources. We developed warfare not as a tool for conquest, but as a tool for survival. When Captain Chin eliminated the Drakhtari fleet, she wasn't being unusually violent by human standards. She was applying standard tactical doctrine for dealing with an existential threat. General Morduck leaned forward. "Ambassador, when your species encounters a threat, what is the typical response?" Hartwell's smile became something that made every non-human in the room feel deeply uncomfortable. "General, humans have a saying, if something is worth killing, it's worth overkilling. When we identify an existential threat, we don't just defeat it. We eliminate it so thoroughly that it can never threaten us again." "That seems extreme," Counselor Telvan said weakly. "Does it?" Hartwell asked. "Let me ask you this, Counselor. The Drakhtari have been expanding for 50 years. They've consumed how many worlds? Killed how many billions of sentient beings? And the Council's response has been what? Measured force? Diplomatic overtures? Defensive actions? We follow established protocols for conflict resolution. You've been feeding the monster," Hartwell said bluntly, echoing Captain Chin's earlier words. "You've been so concerned with maintaining the moral high ground that you've allowed a genocidal hive mind to grow strong enough to threaten entire species." The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Everything Hartwell was saying had an uncomfortable ring of truth to it. Ambassador Kethare said quietly, "What would humans recommend for dealing with the remaining Drakhtari forces?" "Total war," Hartwell replied without hesitation. "Track down every hive cluster, every breeding world, every bioship that escaped today's action. Hunt them to the edge of the galaxy and beyond if necessary. Don't stop until the Drakhtari are extinct as a spacefaring species." "Genocide," whispered Counselor Vextai. "Survival," Hartwell corrected. "The Drakhtari are not a species in the way you understand the term. They're a galactic infection that spreads and consumes until nothing is left. You can either eliminate them completely, or you can wait for them to grow strong enough to eliminate you." Captain Chin spoke up for the first time since Hartwell's arrival. "Counselors, I understand that our methods seem extreme, but consider this. In 3 hours, a single human patrol squadron eliminated a threat that has been growing for 50 years. We didn't do it through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. We did it through superior tactical doctrine and the willingness to do what was necessary. And what if that doctrine is turned against Council species?" Counselor Yilandra asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a physical weight. It was the fear that every being in the room was thinking, but none had dared voice until now. Hartwell and Chun exchanged a glance, and something passed between them that none of the non-humans could quite interpret. "Counselor," Hartwell said finally, "humans have a concept called proportional response. If a council species threatened human interests through economic competition or diplomatic pressure, we would respond through economic and diplomatic channels. If a council species threatened human colonies through military action, we would respond with military action. And if a council species threatened human survival, Hartwell's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes made every being in the room suddenly very aware of how isolated they were in the vast emptiness of space. Counselor, no species has ever threatened human survival, and lived to discuss the experience. The conference ended shortly after, with the council members retreating to their respective ships to digest what they had learned. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, not as explorers or traders or diplomats, but as the most efficient killers the galaxy had ever seen. And as the human fleet prepared to depart the Corvani system, leaving behind only debris fields where a galactic threat had once existed, every species in the Galactic Council was forced to confront a terrifying new reality. They had called for allies to help them against an existential threat. But what had answered was something far more dangerous than their enemies could ever hope to be. 6 months after the Battle of Corvinus Prime, the Galactic Council found itself in an unprecedented situation. They had not one but 3 emergency sessions scheduled for the same week, all dealing with the same subject: humanity. Ambassador Kethare stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Chamber on Nexus Station, the massive space habitat that served as the Council's seat of government. Around her, in rising tiers that stretched up until they disappeared into carefully controlled atmospheric haze, sat the representatives of 47 different species. Some were present physically, others appeared as holograms, but all of them were focused on her. She had been chosen to deliver the Xenological Assessment Committee's report on humanity, the most comprehensive study of an alien species in Council history. The findings were concerning. Honored representatives, she began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. The committee has completed its analysis of the human species and their potential impact on galactic civilization. The results of our study are unprecedented. A murmur ran through the assembly. In the 6 months since the Corvani rescue, humanity had become the most discussed topic in galactic politics. Some council members viewed them as potential saviors who could finally end the Drakhtari threat permanently. Others saw them as a new threat that might be worse than the one they had supposedly solved. The human species originated on a planet they designate as Earth, located in what they call the Sol System. Our xenobiological analysis confirms their claim that this world qualifies as a Class 12 death world, the highest classification in our system. To put this in perspective, the second most dangerous inhabited world in Council space is the Thrakkery homeworld of Kestar, which rates as Class 4. More murmurs, these tinged with disbelief. Several species had never even heard of worlds above Class 6. The implications of this cannot be overstated, Kethare continued. Every aspect of human evolution was shaped by constant mortal threat. They developed pack-hunting behaviors to bring down creatures larger and stronger than themselves. They developed tool use as a survival necessity. Most significantly, they developed what they call persistence hunting, the ability to literally chase prey to death through superior endurance. In the Terran observation booth, a new addition to the council chambers, hastily constructed after humanity had requested formal observer status, Ambassador Hartwell watched the proceedings with quiet amusement. Next to him sat Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the Terran Diplomatic Corps' chief xenopsychologist, and General Marcus Webb, commander of the Terran Defense Forces Galactic Operations. "They're trying to figure out if we're going to eat them," Dr. Rodriguez murmured. "Can you blame them?" General Webb replied quietly. "We did just demonstrate that we can eliminate their worst nightmare like we're swatting flies." Hartwell nodded, but said nothing. He was more interested in watching the political undercurrents in the assembly. The council was splitting into factions, and not along the lines anyone had expected. The committee's analysis of human military capabilities is equally unprecedented, Kethare continued. In their brief history as a spacefaring species, humans have engaged in 14 separate conflicts with various hostile entities. Their casualty ratios are disturbing. A holographic display appeared above the assembly floor, showing statistical data that made several representatives gasp audibly. In every recorded engagement, Human forces have achieved casualty ratios exceeding 20-1 in their favor. In several cases, they have achieved complete victory with 0 human casualties while inflicting total losses on their opponents. How is that possible? Called out Counselor Vextai of the Belnari hegemony. Kethare's skin shifted to a darker shade of blue, the Veltharian equivalent of grimness. The committee believes it is due to what humans call tactical doctrine, where most species develop military strategies based on achieving objectives while minimizing casualties. Humans develop strategies based on achieving objectives while maximizing enemy casualties. "That's barbaric," exclaimed Counselor Yilandra of the Minari Republic. "That's effective," came a new voice from the assembly floor. Everyone turned to see General Morduk of the Corvani Defense Force rising from his seat. The massive bear-like alien had been invited to address the assembly as the only military commander to witness human tactics firsthand. "Honored General," the assembly president said formally, "you wish to address the chamber?" "Edo." Morduk's voice carried throughout the chamber without amplification. "6 months ago, I watched my entire fleet die trying to protect my homeworld from a Drakhtari invasion. 47 billion of my people were hours away from death. Then, the humans arrived." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the story, but hearing it from Morduk himself carried a weight that statistics could not convey. In 3 hours, 24 human ships did what the combined militaries of the Council have failed to do in 50 years. They didn't just defeat the Drakhtari. They erased them so completely that my children will never know the fear that my generation lived with every day. "But their methods," began Counselor Yilandra. "Save my people," Morduk interrupted. "Counselor, you speak of human methods as if they were something shameful. Let me tell you what I learned watching humans fight. They don't just want to win. They want their enemies to cease existing. And when your enemy is a species that consumes entire worlds, that is exactly the kind of ally you want." The chamber erupted in discussion, representatives talking over each other in a dozen different languages. The assembly president called for order several times before the debate died down enough for the session to continue. "The committee has identified 3 primary concerns regarding human integration into galactic society," Kethare resumed. "First, their military capabilities far exceed those of any existing Council species. Second, their psychological profile suggests they view conflict in fundamentally different terms than any known civilization. Third, their technological development appears to be accelerating at an unprecedented rate." That last point caused another stir. Several species had been monitoring human transmissions and trade negotiations, and the rate at which they were absorbing and improving upon galactic technology was concerning. In 6 months, they have gone from having no faster-than-light travel to operating one of the most advanced hyperspace fleets in known space. Their scientists have taken our basic shield technologies and improved them by orders of magnitude. Most concerning, they have somehow found ways to weaponize scientific principles that we considered purely theoretical, such as, asked Counselor Telvan of the Thrakkery Union, quantum destabilization weapons, gravity manipulation bombs, something they call entropic cascade missiles that our physicists aren't even sure are theoretically possible. In the observation booth, General Webb smiled grimly. "They don't know the half of it," he murmured. Dr. Rodriguez shot him a warning look. "Marcus, please tell me you're not planning to demonstrate our more exotic capabilities." "Depends on how this vote goes," Webb replied. "If they decide we're too dangerous to have around, they might force our hand." Hartwell held up a hand to silence them. Below, the debate was reaching a crescendo as various council members argued for different approaches to the human problem. "We should offer them full membership immediately," argued Counselor Zenkar of the Altarian Federation. "Their military capabilities could finally solve the Drakhtari threat permanently." "We should restrict their access to galactic technology," countered Counselor Yilandra. "Their rate of advancement is destabilizing to established civilizations." "We should study them more carefully before making any decisions," suggested Counselor Telvan. "We don't understand their long-term goals." "We should be afraid," said a new voice, and the chamber fell silent. The speaker was Counselor Ethmara of the Seraphim Collective, the most advanced technological civilization in Council space. The Seraphim rarely spoke during Council sessions, and when they did, everyone listened. The human technological advancement rate suggests they will surpass our capabilities within a decade, Ethmara continued, her synthetic voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Their military doctrine suggests they view total victory as the only acceptable outcome in any conflict. Their psychological profile suggests they are incapable of accepting permanent subordinate status to any other species. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Are you suggesting the humans represent a threat to the Council itself? Asked the Assembly President. I am suggesting that the humans represent a threat to the concept of the Council as the supreme authority in galactic civilization, Ethmara replied. They are not a species that will accept guidance from others indefinitely. Eventually, they will decide that they know better how to govern galactic civilization. In the observation booth, the three humans exchanged glances. Ethmara had just articulated something that none of them had said out loud, but all of them had been thinking. She's not wrong, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. Our psychological profiles show that humans have never successfully existed as a permanently subordinate species to another intelligence. We either achieve equality or dominance. And when we achieve dominance, Hartwell added thoughtfully, we tend to restructure everything around our own values and priorities. General Webb nodded, which, in this case, would mean total elimination of the Drakhtari threat, restructuring galactic defense around human military doctrine, and probably overhauling the Council's decision-making processes to be more efficient. Below them, the debate raged on, but it was becoming clear that the Council was deadlocked. Some species wanted to embrace humanity as the solution to their problems. Others wanted to contain humanity as a potential threat. Still others wanted to study humanity until they could better understand what they were dealing with. None of them seemed to understand that the decision might not be theirs to make. Honored representatives, came a new voice from the chamber floor, and everyone turned to see Ambassador Hartwell standing at the entrance to the observation booth. I request permission to address the Assembly. The Assembly President looked surprised. Ambassador, this is a closed session. Discussing the future of my species, Hartwell interrupted politely. I think we should have some input on the matter. After a moment of hurried consultation among the senior counselors, permission was granted. Hartwell walked calmly to the center of the chamber, his diplomatic bearing unchanged despite the fact that he was surrounded by representatives who were actively debating whether his species was too dangerous to exist freely. Honored representatives, he began, I've been listening to your debate with great interest. You're trying to decide what to do about humanity, whether to embrace us, contain us, study us, or fear us. He paused, letting his words sink in. But you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. Which is? Asked the Assembly President. Hartwell smiled, and every being in the chamber suddenly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental controls. You think this is your decision to make. The silence that followed was absolute. Let me clarify something, Hartwell continued, his tone conversational. Humans didn't come to galactic civilization seeking permission to exist. We didn't ask for your approval of our methods. We responded to a call for help and provided aid to a species facing extinction. That you find our methods disturbing is noted, Ambassador. Counselor Vextai said carefully, surely you understand our concerns. Your species' capabilities and methodologies are unlike anything in our experience. Of course I understand your concerns, Hartwell replied. You're worried that we're going to do to you what we did to the Drakhtari. You're worried that we're going to decide you're a threat and eliminate you. The admission sent a wave of nervous energy through the chamber. But here's what you need to understand, Hartwell continued. The Drakhtari were a hive mind bent on consuming all organic life in the galaxy. You are not. You are individual species with your own cultures, governments, and rights to exist. Humans do not eliminate people for being different from us. We eliminate them for threatening innocent life. And who decides what constitutes a threat? Asked Counselor Ethmara pointedly. Hartwell's smile became something that would haunt the dreams of everyone present. "We do." The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Fear was beginning to override diplomatic protocol. However, Hartwell said, raising his voice enough to be heard over the chaos, "I didn't come here to threaten anyone. I came here to make an offer." The noise gradually died down as representatives realized he wasn't finished speaking. "The Galactic Council has spent 50 years trying to contain a threat that was always going to eventually consume everything you've built. You've tried measured responses, diplomatic solutions, and defensive strategies against an enemy that only understands total consumption. It hasn't worked." "Your point?" asked the Assembly President. "My point is that you need us more than we need you." Hartwell let that sink in for a moment. "In 6 months, we've eliminated more Drakhtari than the Council has in 50 years. We've demonstrated technologies you didn't know were possible. We've shown you what total victory looks like." "So what are you proposing?" asked General Morduck. "Partnership," Hartwell replied. "Not membership in the Council as it currently exists, but partnership in rebuilding galactic civilization into something that can actually protect itself. You provide us with information about Drakhtari positions and galactic infrastructure. We provide you with the military force necessary to eliminate them permanently." "And after the Drakhtari are gone?" asked Counselor Ylandra suspiciously. "After the Drakhtari are gone, we help you build a galactic civilization that doesn't need to worry about the next existential threat," Hartwell replied. "Because there will be a next one. There always is." The chamber fell silent as representatives considered the implications. What Hartwell was offering wasn't membership in their club. It was a complete restructuring of galactic civilization with humans as the dominant military force. It was exactly what Counselor Ethmara had predicted. "Ambassador," the Assembly President said carefully, "what if the Council declines your offer?" Hartwell shrugged. "Then you decline our offer. We'll continue hunting down Drakhtari forces on our own. We'll continue developing our technology. We'll continue expanding our territory. And eventually, when the next existential threat appears, and it will, you'll call for help again." "And you'll answer?" "If we're available," Hartwell replied pleasantly. "If we're not too busy dealing with our own priorities." The message was clear: cooperate now, or become irrelevant later. As Hartwell walked back to the observation booth, leaving the Council to debate his proposal, every representative in the chamber was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had called for allies to help them against an existential threat. But what had answered was offering to become their new existential threat if they didn't accept the partnership on human terms. The age of human galactic dominance hadn't begun with conquest or invasion. It had begun with a rescue mission. 2 years after the Battle of Corvinus Prime, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the TFS Prometheus, humanity's newest and largest starship, watching the final moments of the Drakhtari homeworld. The planet below, if it could still be called a planet, was a writhing mass of biomechanical structures that pulsed with sickly organic light. It was the primary hive world, the heart of the Drakhtari collective consciousness, and in approximately 30 minutes, it would cease to exist. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez over the comms system. "All fleet elements report ready for Operation Final Solution. Quantum torpedoes are armed, and targeting solutions are locked." "Thank you, Captain. Begin the countdown." Chun had come a long way from commanding a patrol squadron. The success at Corvinus Prime had led to her promotion to Admiral and command of the newly formed Galactic Threat Elimination Force, a joint Human Council military organization that existed for one purpose: the complete eradication of the Drakhtari species. The fleet surrounding the dying world was a testament to how much galactic civilization had changed. Human dreadnoughts worked alongside Corvani engineering vessels. Belnari heavy cruisers provided fire support to Thrakari assault ships, and Zarathi crystal ships coordinated targeting data through quantum-linked communication networks. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, representing over 40 different species united under human military doctrine. "Admiral Chun," came another voice over the comm. This is General Morduck aboard the Corvani's Revenge. My engineering teams report the planetary shield disruptors are in position and ready to activate on your command. Chen smiled grimly. General Morduck had become one of humanity's strongest advocates after witnessing what human military efficiency could accomplish. The massive Corvani had spent the last 2 years learning human tactical doctrine and applying it to his own forces with devastating effectiveness. Thank you, General. Stand by. The partnership that Ambassador Hartwell had proposed during that fateful council session had been accepted eventually. It had taken another Drakhtari attack on a Minari colony world and the complete failure of traditional council military doctrine to convince the more skeptical species that human methods, however disturbing, were necessary for survival. What had emerged wasn't the Galactic Council as it had existed for centuries, but something new, the Galactic Defense Alliance. The political structure remained largely the same, but military command had been unified under human leadership. The results spoke for themselves. In 2 years, human-led forces had reduced the Drakhtari from a galactic threat to a species fighting for survival in their home system. 300 hive worlds had been sterilized. Thousands of bioships had been destroyed. The Drakhtari population had been reduced from trillions to millions. Today would see those millions reduced to zero. Admiral, came the voice of Ambassador Kethare over the diplomatic channel. The Veltharian had become the Alliance's official liaison to remaining neutral species. I have a formal query from the Seraphim Collective regarding the necessity of complete planetary destruction. They're asking if containment might be sufficient. Chen's expression hardened. This had been a point of contention throughout the campaign. Several species still believed that genocide, even the genocide of a hive-minded species bent on galactic consumption, was ethically unacceptable. Ambassador, please remind the Seraphim that we tried containment with 17 different hive clusters. Every single one eventually broke free and resumed expansion. The Drakhtari cannot be negotiated with, reformed, or permanently contained. They can only be eliminated. Understood, Admiral. I'll relay your response. The truth was more complex than Chun cared to explain over open channels. Humanity had studied the Drakhtari extensively over the past 2 years, and what they had learned was terrifying. The hive mind wasn't just a collective consciousness. It was a galactic-scale infection that could potentially spread through quantum-linked communication networks. Even a single surviving bioship could eventually rebuild the entire swarm given enough time and resources. Total extinction wasn't just militarily necessary. It was the only way to ensure that the Drakhtari could never threaten galactic civilization again. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez reported, we have confirmation from all fleet elements. Every ship is in position and ready to proceed. Chen looked out at the fleet one more time. Over 2,000 ships from dozens of different species, all following human battle plans and using weapons designed according to human military philosophy. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Today we complete a mission that began 2 years ago with a single distress call. Today we eliminate the Drakhtari threat permanently. When our children look up at the stars, they will do so knowing that this particular nightmare can never harm them. She paused, thinking about the irony of the situation. Humanity had come to galactic civilization as rescuers, but their methods had been so effective that they had essentially taken over galactic defense. Not through conquest or coercion, but through simple competence. Remember, she continued, we do this not out of hatred or revenge, but because it is necessary for the survival of innocent life throughout the galaxy. Fire when ready. The next few minutes were both spectacular and horrifying to witness. Thousands of quantum torpedoes streaked toward the Drakhtari homeworld, each one containing enough destructive energy to level a continent. The planet's biomechanical defenses, evolved over millions of years to protect the hive mind's core, proved utterly inadequate against weapons designed by a species that had perfected the art of killing. The first wave of torpedoes struck the planetary shields, overloading them instantly and creating cascading failures throughout the biomechanical defense grid. The second wave penetrated to the planet's surface, targeting the massive hive structures that housed the collective consciousness. The third wave targeted the planet's core. What happened next would be studied by physicists for generations. The quantum torpedoes didn't just destroy matter, they destabilized it at the subatomic level, causing a chain reaction that consumed the planet from the inside out. In less than 10 minutes, a world that had existed for millions of years simply stopped existing. Confirmed total planetary destruction, reported Captain Rodriguez. All Drakhtari biosignatures have ceased. The hive mind is extinct. A cheer went up across the fleet channels as representatives from dozens of species celebrated the end of a 50-year nightmare. But Chen found herself strangely subdued. She had just presided over the extinction of an entire species, something that would have been unthinkable to most galactic civilizations just a few years ago. "Admiral," came Ambassador Hartwell's voice over the secure command channel. "Congratulations on a successful operation. How are you feeling?" Chen considered the question carefully. Hartwell had remained on Earth as humanity's primary diplomatic representative to the galaxy, but his influence was felt throughout the Alliance. He had been the one to convince the various species that human methods, however extreme, were necessary for long-term survival. "Like we just did something that needed to be done," she replied finally. "But also like we just crossed a line that most of galactic civilization never thought they would have to cross." "That's the burden of being the apex predator," Hartwell replied. "Someone has to make the hard decisions that everyone else is too civilized to make. Someone has to be willing to do what's necessary to protect the innocent. And if that someone becomes the thing that others need protection from." There was a long pause before Hartwell responded. "Then, I suppose we'll find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the Alliance Council. The holographic image that appeared showed representatives from over 30 different species, all looking relieved but also somewhat shell-shocked. "Admiral Chun," said the Assembly President, a role now rotated among species, but coordinated through human military staff, "on behalf of the Galactic Defense Alliance, we thank you for your successful completion of the Drakhtari elimination campaign. The galaxy is now free from this threat for the first time in over 50 years. Thank you, Mr. President. What are our next priorities?" That question had been the subject of intense debate throughout the Alliance. With the Drakhtari eliminated, what was the purpose of the massive military force that humanity had built? Some species wanted to demobilize and return to the old ways. Others argued that there would always be new threats requiring human military expertise. The Alliance Council has voted to establish the Galactic Security Initiative, the President continued. Under this program, human-led forces will be responsible for identifying and eliminating potential threats before they can reach the level of the Drakhtari. Additionally, all member species will adopt standardized defense protocols based on human military doctrine. Chen nodded. It was exactly what she had expected. The galaxy had learned that being peaceful and civilized meant nothing if you couldn't protect yourself from those who weren't. Human military philosophy was spreading throughout galactic civilization like a virus, a beneficial virus that made everyone more capable of defending themselves, but a virus nonetheless. Understood, Mr. President. I'll begin coordinating with Alliance military commanders to establish patrol schedules and threat assessment protocols. The transmission ended, leaving Chun alone with her thoughts as the fleet began its dispersal to new patrol assignments throughout the galaxy. In the space where the Drakhtari homeworld had existed, there was now only empty void and drifting particles, all that remained of the species that had once threatened to consume everything. "Admiral," came a new voice over the comm. "Dr. Sarah Rodriguez from the Diplomatic Corps. I've been monitoring galactic communication networks. There's something you should see." A data stream appeared on Chen's personal display showing intercepted communications from various non-aligned species, civilizations that had remained neutral during the Drakhtari War. The content was concerning. Messages discussing human expansion, military occupation disguised as protection, and the need to prepare for the next threat to galactic freedom. Several species were apparently forming their own defensive alliances specifically to counter what they perceived as growing human dominance. "They're afraid of us," Chen said quietly. "Yes," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "And frankly, they should be. We've demonstrated that we can eliminate any threat to galactic stability. The question is, what happens when they decide we're the threat?" Chun stared out at the stars, thinking about the trajectory humanity had been on since that first distress call from the Corvani system. They had come as rescuers, but their effectiveness had made them rulers. They had saved galactic civilization from one existential threat, but in doing so, they had become the next existential threat. "Doctor, what's your professional assessment of the long-term stability of our current situation?" "Unstable," Rodriguez replied immediately. "Human psychology doesn't allow for permanent subordination, and neither does the psychology of most other species. Eventually, someone's going to test us, and when they do,